In a notable departure from traditional alliances, the United States has diverged from its European counterparts regarding the conflict in Ukraine. During votes on United Nations resolutions aimed at resolving the three-year war, the United States declined to assign blame to Russia for its invasion. This action highlights a growing rift in transatlantic relations. This division follows the United States' decision to engage in direct negotiations with Russia concerning the war's resolution. This move has caused dismay among Ukrainian and European allies who were excluded from initial discussions. During a session of the United Nations General Assembly, the United States sided with Russia in opposing a resolution backed by European nations and initiated by Ukraine that explicitly condemned Russia's aggression and demanded the immediate removal of Russian forces. Subsequently, the United States abstained from voting on its own resolution after European nations, led by France, successfully amended it to clearly identify Russia as the aggressor. These votes occurred on the third anniversary of Russia's invasion, coinciding with French President Emmanuel Macron's visit to Washington. Reflecting on earlier talks between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul during early 2022, a United States special envoy noted that these discussions could provide a framework for future negotiations. However, an agreement based on these protocols would essentially represent a surrender. Russian President Vladimir Putin and other high-ranking Russian officials have consistently pointed to the 2022 Istanbul peace negotiations as their preferred basis for future peace talks. As such a framework would require the West to concede to all of Russia's long-standing demands. Reports from reputable news outlets indicate that draft treaties from the March and April 2022 negotiations suggest both Russia and Ukraine initially agreed that Ukraine would abandon its aspirations to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and adopt a status of permanent neutrality, abstaining from participation in military alliances. The proposed treaties also reportedly prohibited Ukraine from acquiring foreign weapons or hosting foreign military personnel. Russia also sought to limit the Ukrainian military to 85,000 soldiers, 342 tanks, and 519 artillery systems. Additionally, Russia demanded that Ukrainian missiles be restricted to a range of 40 kilometers, a distance that would allow Russian forces to deploy critical systems and equipment near Ukraine without fear of attack. The draft treaties reportedly designated the United States, the United Kingdom, the People's Republic of China, France, and Russia as guarantors of the treaty, with Russia also seeking to include Belarus. These guarantor states would be required to terminate any international treaties or agreements incompatible with Ukraine's permanent neutrality, including military aid agreements. Ukraine is unlikely to agree to any peace settlement founded on the Istanbul negotiations, as these provisions would effectively constitute a complete surrender to Russia's long-term objectives. The Istanbul negotiations essentially accommodated Russia's long-standing demands to destabilize and diminish Ukraine to the point where it could not defend itself against future Russian aggression and abandon its aspirations to join NATO or any other security blocs. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky withdrew from the Istanbul negotiations in 2022 with the support of Europe and the United States, and he is expected to reject such terms in 2025. President Zelensky has affirmed his commitment to upholding Ukraine's democracy and achieving a just resolution to the war. During a recent forum, when asked about the possibility of stepping down as president, Zelensky stated he would be prepared to do so to facilitate peace or ensure Ukraine's immediate membership in NATO. Zelensky reiterated his intention to hold elections after the war concludes, emphasizing his lack of interest in remaining in power indefinitely. He also noted that Ukraine cannot hold elections until Russia ceases its attacks and martial law is lifted. Zelensky emphasized that several European officials would visit Kyiv for the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and emphasized the importance of European countries being involved in future peace negotiations. Zelensky identified NATO membership as one of the most effective security guarantees for Ukraine, and mentioned that Ukraine would also consider membership in the European Union, Western funding for a substantial Ukrainian military, and the presence of a Western peacekeeping force in Ukraine as acceptable security guarantees in the event of a ceasefire with Russia. Ukrainian officials continue to emphasize Ukraine's domestic defense sector and its domestically produced strike capabilities. President Zelensky stated that Ukraine produced a significant number of first-person view drones and long-range drones and intends to increase its drone production in the coming year. Zelensky noted that Ukraine had increased production of artillery systems and is working to develop a counterpart to the United States-produced Patriot air defense system. Zelensky noted the sources of funding for Ukraine's domestic defense production and stated that Ukraine intends to increase its funding share in the coming year. Ukraine's defense minister stated that Ukraine has become a leading producer of tactical and long-range drones, with a large percentage of the Ukrainian military's drones being purchased or produced domestically. Ukraine's digital transformation minister announced plans to operationalize technology that will enable a single drone operator to control multiple drones in a swarm. The commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces stated that Ukrainian unmanned systems forces conducted numerous long-range operations and struck a significant number of objects in Russia, and that Ukraine has deployed a large number of drones to the front lines and is working to increase its production of fiber optic drones. He noted that Ukrainian long-range drones can strike targets deep within Russian territory. Russian President Vladimir Putin appointed a new special presidential representative for investment and economic cooperation with foreign countries. This individual was part of the Russian delegation that met with United States officials in Saudi Arabia, and sources suggest his appointment was partly in response to United States demands for a representative who understands the United States, given his background studying and working in the United States. In the lead-up to the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russian forces launched a high number of drone strikes against Ukraine. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that Russian forces launched ballistic missiles and a large number of Shahed and other drones from various directions. Ukrainian forces downed a significant number of Shahed and decoy drones, and that a large number of drones were lost, likely due to Ukrainian electronic warfare interference. Ukrainian officials reported that drones damaged infrastructure in several regions, and that a missile damaged civilian infrastructure in Kryvyi Rih. President Zelensky stated that Russia launched the largest number of Shahed drones against Ukraine. Russia appears to be increasingly reliant on Iran and North Korea to sustain its war effort in Ukraine. Iran has been instrumental in enabling Russia to launch frequent drone strikes by providing Russia with Iranian-designed and produced Shahed drones and assisting Russia in establishing its own Shahed drone production facility. Ukraine's main military intelligence directorate head stated that a significant portion of Russia's ammunition is now sourced from North Korea, which has begun large-scale deliveries of artillery systems and multiple launch rocket systems. He added that North Korea plans to supply Russia with ballistic missiles. Disturbingly, reports continue to surface of Russian forces executing Ukrainian prisoners of war in violation of international law. Ukraine's ombudsman reported footage circulating on social media depicting a Russian service member executing a Ukrainian prisoner of war in the Kursk region. These instances of Russian service members executing Ukrainian prisoners of war appear to be a systemic issue within the Russian military, with Russian commanders either complicit in or directly enabling such atrocities.